In the distant future, Earth's once thriving civilization had been reduced to rubble. The galaxy's most powerful empires, seeing humanity as a primitive and weak species, had set their sights on the small blue planet. They underestimated the tenacity and spirit of Earth's inhabitants. Humanity's technology had been stolen, its leaders crushed, and its people enslaved. However, amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. The last bastion of human resistance was about to make a stand. The powerful Galactic Overlords, led by the seemingly indestructible leader of the Zarin Empire, had dispatched their fleets to Earth, intending to wipe out the last remnants of humanity. With a death sentence hanging over their heads, humanity's survivors were forced into hiding in the deepest corners of space. Yet they refused to surrender. General Sarah Beckett, a veteran of the Resistance, watched the stars from a hidden outpost on a rogue moon. Her heart burned with defiance as she gazed at the endless expanse, knowing the final battle was coming. The humans had fought against impossible odds before, but this time was different. This time, they would fight for their very existence. Sarah had assembled a small but fierce force, soldiers, engineers, and strategists from every corner of Earth. They were survivors, each with their own story of loss and survival. Despite the odds, they had come together, united by one unbreakable bond, a refusal to be extinguished by the galaxy's most ruthless overlords. Across the galaxy, the Zarin Empire prepared for the final phase of their conquest. With their vast warships orbiting around the gas giants of the Outer Rim, they were ready to launch their assault on Earth's last stronghold. The Zarin fleet's supreme technology dwarfed anything humanity could muster. Their weapons could obliterate entire cities with a single shot, and their armies consisted of genetically engineered soldiers, towering in size and strength. They had crushed civilizations far older and more advanced than humanity in their unrelenting march for domination. The human resistance, on the other hand, had no such advantages. They had no warships capable of facing the Zarin fleet, no armies of super soldiers. What they had were determination, cunning, and an undying will to survive. General Beckett's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the intelligence reports. The Zarin Empire's fleet would be entering Earth's orbit within days, and with every passing hour, the Resistance's window of opportunity to strike was closing. Their strategy was simple: hit the Empire hard before they could establish a foothold on Earth. If they failed, Earth would fall. But if they succeeded, it would send a message across the galaxy: humanity would never be cowed. As the Resistance fighters began to mobilize, they knew they were outmatched in terms of firepower and resources. But they had something the Zarin Empire didn't: the will to fight, no matter the odds. They had learned from their past mistakes, and this time, they would not fight conventionally. They would strike where the Zarin overlords would least expect it, at the heart of their power. On the eve of the final battle, Sarah gathered her officers. The air was thick with tension as they all stood in a quiet room, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of star maps. Each person knew the stakes were higher than ever before. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We don't just fight for our survival. We fight for the future of humanity. The Zarin think they've broken us. Let's prove them wrong." The officers nodded, their resolve hardening. They would make their stand. In the end, it wouldn't matter how technologically superior the Zarin were. Humanity had always been underestimated. And now, it was time to show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. The countdown began. A war unlike any the galaxy had ever seen was about to unfold. As the Resistance's fleet assembled in the shadows of a distant asteroid belt, General Beckett's mind raced with strategies and contingencies. Her force, though skilled and passionate, was still vastly outnumbered. Even with surprise on their side, they faced an uphill battle. The Zarin fleet, boasting massive warships, impenetrable shields, and unparalleled firepower, seemed invincible. But humanity had something the Zarin didn't expect: ingenuity. The final piece of their plan was a weapon they had barely tested, an experimental device crafted from the remnants of old Earth technology and stolen alien technology. The weapon was capable of disrupting the massive shields surrounding the Zarin ships. It was humanity's last hope. The device, codenamed Aegis, was a technological marvel, conceived by a small team of brilliant engineers from Earth. The weapon worked by emitting a concentrated pulse that interfered with the energy fields surrounding enemy ships. Once the shields were disabled, the Resistance could strike the Zarin fleet with conventional weapons, which had previously been ineffective against the Zarin's defenses. It wasn't a guaranteed solution, but it was their best chance. The weapon's primary design flaw, however, was that it required precise timing and positioning. A single miscalculation could result in a catastrophic failure, leaving humanity vulnerable to the Zarin's devastating counterattack. With this device, the Resistance had one shot, one chance to tilt the scales in their favor. Sarah Beckett sat in the command center, watching the fleet prepare for the battle ahead. Her hand hovered over the tactical console, waiting for the moment to launch the Aegis device. She knew the risks, but there was no turning back now. Her eyes scanned the faces of her crew, each one was resolute, but the weight of the mission was clear on their faces. "Status report," she ordered, her voice unwavering despite the storm of anxiety in her chest. Commander Elias Hargrave, one of the Resistance's best tacticians, responded. "The fleet is in position, General. All ships are ready, but the Zarin fleet is still in motion. We can't afford to waste any time." General Beckett nodded. "Then we go now." She pressed a button on her console, and a series of encrypted signals were sent to the Aegis device aboard the flagship. It was time to make the move. She trusted her team, but the fear of failure loomed large. If the Aegis failed, the Resistance would be helpless. The fleet silently moved toward Earth's atmosphere, cloaked in darkness. For all their technological advancements, the Zarin Empire had yet to perfect countermeasures against the human ability to hide in the vastness of space. The Resistance's fleet remained undetected as they navigated the asteroid belt, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Sarah paced the room, her mind working in overdrive. The device, still in the hands of her engineers, was a last-ditch effort to level the playing field. In her gut, she could feel the weight of the decision. If they failed, Earth's last hope would be lost forever. "Target coordinates locked in," Elias reported. "We're almost there." Just as Sarah prepared to speak, a loud alarm echoed through the ship. Her heart sank. "Incoming Zarin ships," the communications officer shouted. "They've detected us." The fleet was no longer hidden. The battle for survival had begun. The Aegis device had to be deployed immediately, or the Zarin would overwhelm the Resistance before they even had a chance to retaliate. Time was running out. "Deploy the Aegis," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the panic in the air. The weapon activated with a sharp, mechanical hum. A brilliant blue pulse erupted from the flagship, traveling across the vast emptiness of space. The Zarin fleet was just on the other side of the asteroid field, unaware of the approaching attack. The pulse hit the shields of the first Zarin warship, sending shockwaves through the very fabric of the energy barrier. For a brief moment, the shields flickered. Then, they collapsed entirely. "Direct hit!" Elias exclaimed. "The shields are down. We've got them." But the success was short-lived. The rest of the Zarin fleet was already retaliating, launching a barrage of weapons that lit up the darkness of space like a deadly firestorm. The Resistance fleet was now under attack. General Beckett's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment that would decide humanity's fate. Would the Aegis be enough? Or had the odds once again turned against them? The pulse from the Aegis device had been a beacon of hope, but the battle was far from won. As the Zarin fleet's shields faltered, the Resistance fighters surged forward, their ships darting between asteroid fields and debris, using every bit of terrain to shield them from the incoming fire. The Zarin retaliated with overwhelming firepower, their ships launching devastating plasma bursts that sliced through the dark void like infernos. General Beckett's fleet, though smaller, had the advantage of agility and surprise. Their pilots were quick, their tactics unorthodox. Each ship in the Resistance fleet was armed with the finest weapons humanity had scavenged from the galaxy's forgotten corners. Missiles streaked across space, hitting their targets with pinpoint precision. But the Zarin ships were massive, built to withstand the most punishing of blows. The Resistance's weapons alone wouldn't be enough to take them down, not without the Aegis disabling their shields. The flagship, Odyssey, moved in close, with Sarah standing at the helm, her mind focused entirely on the battlefield. Her officers were communicating with the rest of the fleet, coordinating strikes and evading enemy fire. In the chaos of combat, the sheer scale of the Zarin fleet became apparent, hundreds of ships, each one a behemoth of destruction, bearing down on Earth's last hope. The Zarin commander, Captain Zorith, a battle-hardened veteran of countless planetary conquests, watched from the bridge of his flagship as the Resistance fleet flung itself at them. His long, angular face twisted into a sneer of disdain. "These insects think they can challenge the might of the Zarin Empire," he growled, turning to his officers. "Prepare the Alpha fleet for full assault. Crush these pathetic creatures once and for all." Zoritha's fleet began to mobilize, moving in tight formation to deliver a decisive blow to the human forces. The Zarin's superior firepower and coordinated strategies had always been their greatest advantage, and now they would use it to eradicate the nuisance of humanity. But as the Zarin fleet moved in for the kill, a surprising development unfolded. The Aegis device, though damaged during the initial pulse, had begun to stabilize, its powerful energy field expanding across the battlefield. With a series of controlled bursts, the remaining Zarin ships began to flicker as their shields came under strain. A few vessels, weaker than the rest, began to lose their protective energy layers entirely, leaving them vulnerable to the Resistance's next barrage. The odds were shifting, slowly but surely. The Zarin were no longer invulnerable. "Now!" Sarah commanded. With precision timing, the Resistance fleet launched their counterattack. Missiles, torpedoes, and railgun shots rained down on the now defenseless Zarin ships. The Zarin were unprepared for such ferocity from a species they had once thought insignificant. Human ingenuity, despite its disadvantages in numbers and technology, was beginning to carve its mark on the battlefield. On the bridge of Odyssey, the crew cheered as several Zarin warships exploded into fireballs, their massive frames consumed by the devastation. The Resistance had broken through the Zarin's initial line of defense. But the victory came at a steep cost. Human casualties were mounting, and the damage to their own fleet was severe. The odds were still against them. General Beckett knew this moment wouldn't last. The Zarin had plenty of reserves, and their empire's true power had yet to be fully unleashed. This initial success was just the beginning, but the question remained, could they hold the line? "Keep pushing forward," Sarah barked. "We cannot afford to falter now. They're bleeding, but we finish this." As the battle raged on, Resistance fighters pressed their attacks, launching assault after assault on the Zarin's vulnerable spots. Fighters soared through the chaos, delivering blows with deadly efficiency. A few of the human ships had already been lost, and Sarah's heart grew heavy with each one, but she refused to allow despair to take hold. She knew that Earth's future rested on this battle. Amidst the smoke and explosions, one of the Zarin's capital ships, the Juggernaut, loomed large. It had remained mostly untouched by the Aegis pulse, its thick, reinforced shields holding firm. The Juggernaut was the flagship of Zoritha's command, and it was clear that its destruction would break the morale of the Zarin forces. If the Resistance could find a way to take it down, the tide of the war could turn decisively in their favor. "Focus all fire on the Juggernaut," Sarah ordered, eyes fixed on the immense ship. "We take that down, we win this war." The Resistance fleet, battered but resolute, swarmed toward the Juggernaut. This was humanity's moment to prove that against all odds, they could defy even the most overwhelming enemies. The Juggernaut was formidable, but humanity had something the Zarin didn't understand, the relentless will to fight, no matter the cost. The Juggernaut loomed before the Resistance fleet like a living mountain of destruction, its hull bristling with weaponry and heavily reinforced shields. For a moment, Sarah Beckett's heart tightened as she watched it hang in space, an impenetrable fortress. It was the heart of the Zarin fleet, and its destruction was their key to victory. "All ships, focus fire on the Juggernaut's engines," Sarah ordered, her voice firm and unyielding. The engines were the core of its power, and if they could disable them, the massive ship would be left a sitting target. The resistance fighters, despite their depleted numbers, surged forward with renewed fury. Fighters dove through the firestorm, unleashing everything they had at the juggernaut. Missiles, lasers, and plasma rounds ricocheted off its shields, but the resistance kept up the assault. The sound of explosions filled the comms channels, a constant reminder of how high the stakes were. On the bridge of the juggernaut, Captain Zorath snarled as he watched the humans' attacks. They were relentless, but still, their weapons were no match for his ship's defenses. Increase shield strength to maximum. Prepare the annihilation cannon, target the human flagship. Zorath's voice was calm, but there was a flicker of irritation in his eyes. The Resistance's unexpected resilience was proving troublesome. He had believed humanity would be easily crushed, but now they were proving to be a much bigger problem. "Sir, the human ships are targeting our engines," one of Zorath's officers warned. "They're trying to cripple us. We cannot let them succeed." Zorath's eyes hardened. "Deploy all drones. We will surround them and destroy them before they can get any closer." A swarm of small, agile Zarin drones detached from the juggernaut, each one equipped with deadly weapons and capable of overwhelming human fighters with sheer numbers. The drones zipped through space, faster than the human ships could react. It was a desperate tactic, but one that could very well turn the tide back in the Zarin's favor. As the drones closed in, the Resistance pilots fought with everything they had, evading the incoming barrage and returning fire. But despite their skill and determination, the drones were too numerous. One by one, the human ships fell, destroyed in brilliant explosions, their wreckage scattering through space. "General, we're losing too many ships," Commander Hargrave reported, his voice filled with urgency. "We can't hold out much longer unless we do something drastic." Sarah's mind raced. The juggernaut was their target, but the drones were taking a devastating toll on the fleet. If they didn't do something quickly, they'd be wiped out before they could deal a killing blow to the Zarin flagship. There had to be another way. "Commander, I need you to take the Odyssey and get us close to the juggernaut, within striking range. The rest of the fleet will keep those drones busy." Hargrave's eyes widened with understanding. "You want us to board the juggernaut, General?" "Yes," Sarah said, her voice resolute. "We disable its weapons from the inside. If we take down their main gun, we take away their advantage. We'll fight our way in, get to the control center, and make sure that ship can't fire. It's our only shot." Without waiting for a response, Sarah activated the internal comms. "All Resistance ships, focus on the drones. Keep them occupied long enough for Odyssey to close the distance. We need that juggernaut to fall." With no more time to waste, the Odyssey broke from the main formation and dashed toward the heart of the Zarin fleet. The remaining human ships fought with desperation, trying to hold off the drones that were sweeping through their lines. In the chaos, the Odyssey found its path, weaving through enemy fire and debris, until it was within range of the juggernaut. Sarah stood tall at the helm, determination in her eyes as she watched the massive ship grow larger on the viewscreen. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "This is for Earth." She turned to her crew. "Prepare boarding teams. We'll need everyone." As the crew scrambled to ready themselves, Sarah gathered the most skilled fighters, engineers, and strategists. They would be the ones to infiltrate the heart of the juggernaut and disable its weapons systems from the inside. The air on the Odyssey grew thick with tension as the boarding team suited up and prepared to board the enemy ship. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Zarin flagship, find the main weapons control, and destroy it. They would be risking everything for humanity's survival. The odds were slim, but it was the only way forward. The Odyssey's crew made their final preparations as the shuttle carrying Sarah and the elite boarding team descended toward the juggernaut. The shuttle's sleek hull was nearly invisible as it approached the Zarin ship. It touched down gently on the side of the juggernaut, far from the watchful eyes of the Zarin. With a sudden lurch, the shuttle's door opened. The team stormed out, guns drawn, hearts pounding. They moved swiftly and quietly through the hallways, guided by Sarah's tactical knowledge of the ship's layout, which had been gleaned from a stolen Zarin map. Every step was a risk, and every moment could be their last. But the Resistance had no choice. The survival of humanity depended on them succeeding. The Juggernaut was a sprawling labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one a maze of steel and alien technology. As Sarah Beckett and her team moved through the vessel, the air was thick with tension. Every shadow could hide an enemy, every door could be an ambush. They knew that they were entering the heart of the Zarin Empire's power, and failure was not an option. Sarah's hand gripped the weapon at her side as she led her team through a narrow corridor, the hum of the ship's systems vibrating through the floor beneath their boots. They were getting closer to the heart of the Juggernaut, the weapons control center, but the journey wasn't going to be easy. The Zarin would be watching for intruders, and their security systems were legendary. "We're getting close," Sarah muttered, glancing back at her team. "Stay sharp. We can't afford any mistakes." The team moved silently, their footsteps barely audible as they navigated through the alien ship's hallways. Sarah's mind raced with the possibilities. Each room they passed could hide weapons, traps, or worst of all, Zarin soldiers. The Juggernaut was a fortress, and the enemy would fight to protect it. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the hiss of an opening door. A squad of Zarin soldiers emerged, weapons raised and eyes glowing with the eerie green light of their species. They were fast, powerful, and utterly ruthless. Without hesitation, the Resistance team opened fire. The clash was brutal. Energy blasts lit up the dark corridors as the two forces collided, the humans using their speed and agility to their advantage. Sarah's mind was focused solely on the task at hand: get to the control center and disable the ship's weapons before the Zarin could overwhelm them. There was no time for second chances. The gunfire echoed through the metal walls, but Sarah's team was quick and efficient. One by one, the Zarin soldiers fell, their bodies collapsing onto the cold, metallic floor. The Resistance fighters moved with precision, clearing each section of the ship as they advanced. But even as they pushed forward, more and more Zarin soldiers seemed to appear, summoned by the alarms blaring through the ship. The Zarin weren't going to let them reach their goal without a fight. "Move, move," Sarah ordered, as they pressed on, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. The team was exhausted, but they could feel the mission nearing its climax. The control center was just ahead, behind the thick blast doors of the ship's inner sanctum. They reached the doors, and Sarah didn't hesitate. She input the override code, a signal from the stolen Zarin map that allowed them to bypass the security system. The massive doors slowly hissed open, revealing the weapons control center in all its intimidating glory. The room was enormous, with rows upon rows of consoles, each one monitored by a team of Zarin engineers and officers. "Take them down," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The firefight that ensued was nothing short of a storm. Zarin soldiers scrambled to defend the control center, but Sarah's team was faster, hitting their targets with deadly accuracy. Explosions rang out as blasts of energy collided with walls and consoles. In the heart of the battle, Sarah saw the main console, a large, alien device that controlled the Juggernaut's weapons systems. The key to ending the war. With a burst of energy, Sarah's right-hand fighter, Lieutenant Nadia Carver, cleared a path to the console. "Cover me," she yelled as she sprinted toward it, weapons blazing. Sarah's team fought valiantly, holding the line as Nadia reached the console, her fingers flying over the alien controls. The clock was ticking, and every second that passed meant more Zarin reinforcements were coming. Finally, Nadia slammed her hand onto the console, a surge of power pulsing through the room. A loud mechanical whirring filled the air as the Juggernaut's weapons systems powered down. The huge, menacing cannons that had loomed over the battlefield went silent. "We did it!" Nadia shouted, a victorious grin on her face. But Sarah knew better than to celebrate. The battle wasn't over. The Zarin would come for them with everything they had. "Get to the extraction point," Sarah ordered. "Now!" The team moved quickly, but not without heavy casualties. Several of their fighters had been hit in the crossfire, and the remaining members of the team were wounded. They had to get out, and they had to do it fast. As they retreated toward the shuttle, Zarin reinforcements arrived in droves, swarming the corridors like an unstoppable tide. The resistance fighters fought to the last, each one knowing that their survival meant the survival of Earth itself. The shuttle door opened, and Sarah was the last to board. Her breath was ragged, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Let's go," she yelled, and the shuttle lifted off, escaping the chaos of the juggernaut. As they ascended into space, Sarah glanced at the shattered, massive ship in the distance. The juggernaut had been neutralized, but the war was far from over. The resistance had scored a major victory, but the true battle was just beginning. The stars outside the shuttle's windows seemed to stretch endlessly as Sarah Beckett and her team made their way back to the Odyssey. The battle they had just fought, the brutal assault on the juggernaut, had left its mark on both their bodies and their spirits. The loss of life among the resistance was staggering. Ships had been destroyed, comrades lost, and the road ahead still seemed daunting. Yet, despite the devastation, there was something else in the air, a palpable sense of victory. "We did it," Lieutenant Nadia Carver muttered, her voice hoarse. "We really did it." Sarah glanced over at her, her face streaked with blood and grime, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "We've crippled their main weapon, but this is just the beginning. The Zarin won't give up that easily. They'll come for us with everything they have." The shuttle docked with the Odyssey, and the crew disembarked. The Odyssey's bridge was filled with an uneasy quiet as they reviewed the data from the battle. Despite the destruction of the Juggernaut, the Zarin were still a formidable force, and their vast empire extended across hundreds of worlds. There would be no quick victory. General Beckett stood before her officers, each of them looking weary but resolute. The weight of their success hung over them, but it was the knowledge of the task still at hand that dominated their thoughts. "We've taken down their flagship," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the weariness in her eyes. "But the war isn't over. The Zarin will strike back harder than ever. We need to hit them where it hurts. We'll need to take the fight to their homeworlds, strike them at the core." Commander Hargrave, still bruised and bloodied from the battle, stepped forward. "But if we move on their homeworlds, we risk everything. They'll be expecting us. We don't have the numbers to launch a full-scale invasion." "We don't need numbers," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We have something the Zarin don't, the will to fight, the will to survive. We'll strike from the shadows, hit their supply lines, take out their infrastructure. We'll bleed them slowly until they can't fight anymore." Sarah's words resonated with her officers, who nodded in agreement. The resistance had no choice. The Zarin had underestimated humanity's ability to rise against them, and now it was time to capitalize on that miscalculation. "We start with their supply routes," Sarah continued. "We hit their weakest points, and we keep hitting them until they can't hold their ground. The Zarin don't understand what it means to be cornered, to be desperate. They've ruled for so long they've forgotten how to fight from the trenches. But we're not afraid to get our hands dirty." The officers stood in silence for a moment, each of them grappling with the gravity of the mission ahead. The resistance had scored a massive victory, but they were about to embark on an even greater challenge. The Zarin would be furious. They would strike back with everything they had. But Sarah's resolve was unshakable. The resistance had come this far, and they were not going to falter now. Just then, a transmission came through. A familiar face appeared on the screen, Admiral Jason Rivers, one of Earth's top strategists, his face grim but determined. "General Beckett, we've received word from several other resistance factions," he said. "They're ready to support the next phase of the operation. We've got forces assembling across multiple sectors, ready to strike. But we need a plan." Sarah leaned forward, her mind already racing with possibilities. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the chance to turn the tide of the war once and for all. She had spent years planning for this. Now, it was time to make those plans a reality. "We'll strike hard and fast," she said, her voice steady. We'll take their supply routes, cripple their production, and cause as much chaos as possible. We'll force them into a war of attrition. They'll be too spread out, too vulnerable. And when they finally realize the true cost of underestimating humanity, it'll be too late. Admiral Rivers nodded, a glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. Understood. We'll begin the preparations immediately. The connection ended, and Sarah turned to her team. This is it. The war has only just begun. We fight not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. We'll take the fight to the Zeren, and we'll make them regret ever thinking we were weak. The officers nodded in agreement, their spirits renewed. The plan was in motion, and every step they took would bring them closer to the ultimate goal, defeating the Zeren once and for all. As Sarah stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle ahead would be harder than anything they had faced so far, but she knew one thing for certain: humanity would never surrender. The Resistance fleet moved in perfect synchrony as they prepared for the final stages of their war against the Zeren. Sarah Beckett stood at the helm of the Odyssey, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The weight of their journey was heavy on her shoulders, but the fire in her heart burned brighter than ever. Over the past few weeks, they had executed the plan with precision. Supply routes had been ambushed, Zeren factories had been destroyed, and chaos had been unleashed across their empire. The Zeren, once so confident in their dominance, were now scrambling to maintain control. Their arrogance had cost them dearly, and the Resistance had become a force they could no longer ignore. We're close now, Sarah said softly, her gaze fixed on the approaching Zeren homeworld. This is it. The final push. Her officers gathered around her, each one resolute and prepared for the task ahead. The mission was simple but perilous: infiltrate the Zeren homeworld, strike at the heart of their government, and force the Empire to its knees. But this wasn't just a military operation, it was humanity's statement to the galaxy: Earth would not be conquered. Humanity would rise. We've lost many good people along the way, Commander Hargrave said, his voice filled with respect for the fallen. But this is the moment we've all been fighting for. We finish this today. Sarah nodded. For Earth. For everyone we've lost. As they approached the heavily fortified planet, the gravity of the mission set in. The Zeren would be expecting them. The fleet was small compared to the might of the Empire, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that the Resistance had the will to succeed, the fire to overcome the impossible. All ships, prepare for the assault, Sarah ordered. We break through their defenses, and we take the fight to their capital. No mercy. The Resistance fleet entered the atmosphere of the Zeren homeworld, engaging in fierce dogfights as they navigated the complex planetary defenses. The Zeren fought fiercely, but humanity was relentless. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the sky as human and alien ships collided in a brutal exchange of firepower. But Sarah had one final surprise in store. While the Zeren were focused on the fleet, a small group of Resistance operatives, including Sarah, made their way to the surface of the capital city. They would infiltrate the heart of the Zeren government, targeting the leadership that had caused so much suffering to Earth and its people. The streets of the Zeren capital were cold and unforgiving, the towering alien structures casting long shadows over the city. The team moved in silence, their steps swift and calculated. They were the ghosts of humanity, sent to haunt the Zeren and bring an end to their reign. As they reached the central command building, Sarah's hand gripped her weapon tightly. They were almost there. They had fought so long, sacrificed so much, and now, the moment of reckoning had arrived. Stay alert, Sarah whispered to her team. We've come too far to fail now. The entrance to the command building was heavily guarded, but the team moved with the expertise of seasoned soldiers. They cut down the guards with cold precision, their movements flawless as they pushed forward. Inside, they reached the central control room. There, seated in the grand chair, was the Zeren Emperor himself. His alien eyes glowed with an unearthly light as he turned to face them, an amused smile creeping across his face. You think you've won? The Emperor's voice echoed in the chamber, dripping with disdain. You are nothing more than insects to us. You may have crippled our fleet, but you cannot stop the Zeren. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes burning with the fury of humanity's determination. You underestimate us. You thought you could crush us, but we fought back. We've survived. And now, you will pay for every life you've taken. With that, the final battle began. The Zeren Emperor fought with an intensity that matched his arrogance, but Sarah and her team were ready. They fought with the strength of every human who had ever been oppressed, every person who had ever been underestimated. The Emperor's alien power was formidable, but humanity's resolve was stronger. After an intense struggle, Sarah made the final move. With a single strike, she brought the Emperor to his knees, his reign of terror ending in that moment. As the Emperor's body crumpled to the floor, the remaining Zeren forces on the planet fell into disarray. The Resistance, having struck at the very heart of the Empire, had shattered the Zeren's control. The victory was complete. Back aboard the Odyssey, Sarah stood with her crew, watching the fading lights of the Zeren homeworld. The empire that had once seemed unstoppable was now in ruins, its power broken by a handful of humans who refused to surrender. "We did it," Nadia Carver said, her voice filled with awe. Sarah's gaze softened as she looked at the stars outside the ship. "We didn't just defeat them. We showed the galaxy that humanity will never be broken. We'll rise, no matter how impossible the odds." The Resistance fleet began to make its way back, the victorious humanity united, knowing that the future was theirs to shape. They had defied the impossible and conquered the stars, and this victory would be the beginning of a new era. Humanity had proven its place in the galaxy. And the Zeren would never forget the lesson.